As we have learned in class, as countries develop, their populations tend to change for a number of reasons. Today we will compare and contrast the populations of two countries, Poland and Uganda, and discuss how and why they are so different. First, let's look at their population size in absolute numbers. Today, Poland has a population of 38,593,000, whereas Uganda has a slightly larger population of 40,322,000. But although the absolute number of people living in both countries are not too far apart, their population compositions are very different. Let's take a look at their population pyramids. If you look at their pyramids, you can see right off the bat that their shapes are very different. Poland has a more rectangular shape with a tapered base, indicating low birth and death rates and 0 to negative growth. Uganda, on the other hand, has a shape more typical of developing countries, with a narrow top, wide base, and concave sides, indicating rapid growth from high birth rates and falling death rates. But how, when, and why did these changes come to be? First, we're going to look at the crude birth rate to help us to answer the first two questions. There's a large difference in the crude birth rate, or the number of births per 1,000 people in the population. For Poland, birth rates peaked after the baby boom in the early 1980s as women began to postpone their births and join the workforce. And it has been low ever since, thus explaining their pyramid's narrow base. Currently, their birth rate is 9.6, much lower than Uganda's 43.4. Uganda's birth rate, although decreasing with an increase in development, still remains high as it is seen from most developing countries. This occurs today for a number of factors that we will discuss later, but it is important to note that historical reasons for the high birth rate we see today. Like many developing countries, Uganda's development was stunted largely due to the impacts of colonization. When the British left in 1962, they left the country with decades of political instability and civil war. The country is currently making strides in economic growth, political stability, and overall development, but as we can see from their population pyramid, due to their lower level of development, there are still large differences in characteristics such as their crude birth rate in comparison to Poland and other developed countries. But why specifically do we see these differences in birth rate today? There are many factors, but three large ones that we will discuss are education, access to contraceptives, and infant mortality. As we have learned in class, education, especially the education of women, has a huge impact on populations, empowering women to join the workforce and choose to have less children later in life. In Poland, the adult literacy rate is 99.8%, whereas in Uganda it is 73.9%. The expected years of schooling is 16.4, and in Uganda it is 10. And just as there is higher access to education in Poland, there is a greater access to contraceptives as well. In Poland, 66.8% of married women use contraceptives, where in Uganda the number is 11.3%. This is mainly because family planning is not prioritized by the Ugandan government, and access to contraceptives is very low, with only 20% of women having access. Many Ugandan women also lack accurate information about family planning and its safety. With a lack of government provision of contraceptives and family planning education, people in Uganda lack the resources and information needed to be able to have less children. Lastly, there is a large difference in infant mortality rates. In Poland, it is at a low of 5.2 infant deaths per 1,000 live births, whereas in Uganda it is significantly higher at 54.6 deaths. High infant mortality rates often result in higher birth rates as women try to have more children due to the low chances of survival. So we learned a little bit about how, when, and why these populations are the way they are today, but what can we expect for the future of these countries? With their low birth and death rates, Poland's population is expected to continue to decrease continuously and is projected to be as low as 33 million in 2050. A whole third of its population is expected to be over 65 years old, and the country's median age is projected to rise from 32 to 52 years old. The country will soon have to worry about how they will support their quickly aging population. In order to increase its younger working population size, it will need to focus on incentivizing their population to have more children through tax benefits and incentive programs, as well as possibly increasing the flow of migration. On the other hand, Uganda's population is heading in the opposite direction. According to the Population Bureau, with its high birth rates and decreasing death rates, its population is projected to quintuple in size to 130 million, causing extreme overpopulation and problems in poverty and instability. Uganda's current growth rate is already 3 times the global average, and if it continues at this high rate, there will surely be many problems to come. By increasing development as a whole, and specifically increasing education, the provision of health services, family planning education, and access to contraceptives, the Ugandan government can work to slow down their growth. In conclusion, from this video you have learned that although two countries can be similar in number, their populations can be completely different. Poland and Uganda are countries that both must take into account their changing populations in order to have a stable future. Whether it be through increasing or decreasing their population growth, both countries' governments must focus on stabilizing their populations through policies and in practice.